Welcome to Short Story Theater. I am Annabelle, your host for today. Our tale is of authentic Italian food and the all-too-real underbelly of Boston's Little Italy in the 1950s. Here's our friend Matthew, today's teller of Bill Russo's story, The North End Murder.
She was sitting by herself at a table by the window, picking away absently at a plate full of meatballs and gnocchis. She was a good paisan, at least in regard to what she ate. The Victory Casa was an authentic Italian restaurant, which meant that they sold lots of gnocchis, but not one single pizza. If a bunch of tourists somehow wandered onto Hanover Street in Boston's North End, and came into the Victory Casa asking for pizza, they risked bodily injury. "We don't got no pizza," Gino Valenti would angrily tell them. "This is an Italian restaurant. We got gnocchis, rigatoni, meatballs and spumoni, but we don't got no pizzas. Don't you people know Italians almost never eat pizza at home, and they certainly don't eat it in the North End of Boston," he told them, punctuating his speech with a pointer finger that darted dangerously near their eyes. Sometimes the insulted tourists would run in terror from the casa. Other times they would ask Gino for a recommendation, and of course he would tell them to order gnocchis. What are these gnocchis? Well, they are probably the number one choice for a Sunday afternoon dinner, for every Italian immigrant family from Boston all the way up to Gloucester. As a boy, I helped my nonna make them. She mixed up the dough using flour and potatoes. When it was the right consistency, she rolled the dough into long, thin snakes, on the kitchen table. With the skill of a Las Vegas card shark, she cut those snaky rolls into small portions, about 1.5 inches long each, and maybe a 1/2 inch round. Then came my part. In order for it to cook right, in the boiling water, a gnocchi has to have a dimple. Nonna taught me how to poke my pointer and index fingers quickly into the center of the gnocchi, and give a quick snap and flip, which produces the required, dimpled gnocchi. Though we often had spaghetti, lasagna, and other traditional Italian dishes, I can recall only 1 or 2 times that we had pizza, and it was nothing like those flat little crusty cardboard-like things everybody seems to be so fond of these days. People love to buy those flat circles of thin crust, topped with sauce, cheese, all kinds of crazy stuff, sometimes even pineapple. The pizza that Nonna made was baked in a 3-inch deep, rectangular pan. It had crust on the bottom and sides, but was filled to the top with cheese, sauce, pepperoni, salami, and other stuff, and when it came out of the oven, it was cut and served in slices just like an apple pie. That's why it was called pizza pie. Back to gnocchis. I think it's the spelling that scares off the Americans. Gnocchi is spelled Gnocci, the G is silent, so some people say gnocchis, which is wrong. The proper pronunciation is a little difficult, but if you say gnocchi, like Tom Yawkey, the owner of the Boston Red Sox, that's close enough. In our family, my cousin Conchetta started calling them Yankees. And it stuck, so among family members, we always say Yankees instead of gnocchis. Dom DiMaggio knows his gnocchis. Dominic, the star center fielder of the Boston Red Sox, hit .328 this year and scored 131 runs. His brother Jolton Joe DiMaggio only hit .301 for the Yankees. But he did hit 31 home runs. The Yankees won the pennant again this year. They won 98 games. We just missed by 4 games. We had 94 wins. We would have won the whole thing, even the World Series, except that Ted Williams, the last .400 hitter, broke his arm in the All-Star game. Teddy Ballgame only played in 89 games this season, and there's no doubt but that we would have won at least 100 games. If we had the splendid Splinter for a whole season, Fenway Park would have seen its first World Series in more than 30 years, since 1918. But, I'm on the job right now, and have to stop thinking about baseball and food, and concentrate on business, namely the pretty lady sitting by the table next to the window of the Victory Casa. She's the one. Probably 50, looks 30. Except for the gray that's trying to erase the shiny strands of jet black, which still dominate her curly, shoulder-length hair. Still probably weighs 110 pounds tops. On a 5-foot frame, that's about the perfect weight. Everything about her is perfect, except the mouth. She saw me come in. I'm not sure if she knows me, but she might. The North End is not my territory. I work almost exclusively in the North Shore. Generally, my employment is in Salem or Beverly, but I range as far north as Gloucester. I don't work in Lynn, the city of sin. It's a good territory and it is part of the North Shore, but it's pretty big, and it has its own crew. There's over 100,000 people in Lynn. And more than 13,000 of them work in the GE plant. A few years ago, they cranked out hundreds of F/A-18 fighter jets for World War II, and now with the new war going on in Korea, the GE plant is busy doling out helicopters, which are expected to play a big role in the Korean conflict by next year, 1951. You probably heard of Lynn because of that rhyme they made up about the city of Lynn. It goes like this. Lynn, Lynn. The city of sin. You never come out the way you go in. I'm not saying I wouldn't work in Lynn. I have nothing against it, but there's plenty of guys there and really no call for me. I don't usually work in Boston either. Though I have done a couple of pieces of work here, I mostly like to stay near that big old four-family house on Monroe Street, where I was born. That's in a town called Beverly, which was my grandparents' first stop, after they got off Ellis Island 40 years ago, back in 1910. Do I like my job? No. I do not. Nobody likes their job. We work for money. All of us. Whether it's a little bit of dough just to keep food on the table and a roof over your head, or for $1 million like those people down the street, who started the Prince Spaghetti Factory. We're all just working for the dough. Ain't one of us wouldn't rather be on Cape Cod in the summer and Florida in the winter. The lady with the long black curly hair, with the gray streaks, has finished her gnocchis. Gino's waiter has brought her a plate of GGs for dessert. The GGs are one of the favorite treats of the North End. They are little dough balls drenched in honey. Messy to eat and worth every little stray honey drop that falls on your suit, shirt, or your tie. The lady by the window ate her GGs with a precision I never could master. I just picked them up with my fingers and let the mess happen. She carved up her GGs with her table knife and ate them with a fork. She handled that knife, like she knew her way around it. I looked up at the clock on the wall. I was getting a little impatient because it was now past 2, and I had promised Norma I'd pick up some stuff for dinner at the Gloria chain store. Like most women, the former Miss Scalzillo didn't have a driver's license and was a stay-at-home wife and mother. With traffic, it was going to take me more than an hour to cover the 26 miles from Little Italy, back to the city of Beverly. So I was tempted to march right up to the lady and say, "Look ma'am, you've had your last meal. I hope you enjoyed it, but right now it's time for work. So let's get going." She's a proper Italian-American woman. I'm sure that she understands. She knew when she testified against the Big Sabu, that she was crossing the line. She knew the consequences. I'm still amazed they didn't take her out before the trial. I guess they thought she wouldn't dare to testify. Either that or they had some qualms, back then, about taking out a woman, even though they didn't mind eliminating her husband. Another 5 minutes went by, and I seriously considered yelling out, "Okay Mrs. Accomando, time's up. Let's go. Get moving." Turns out, I didn't have to wait any longer. She rose from the table, looked directly at me, and waved. She waved at me. Then she calmly walked out onto Hanover Street, with me right behind. Walking briskly she headed to the waterfront. She knew where I wanted her to go. I figured Hunt's Wharf would be a good place to dump the body. Though I knew she was a good paisan, I was surprised that she was taking everything in so casually. In my line of work, you need to act quickly and without emotion, for if you give someone a minute or two, they will break down. And the tears, and begging for mercy, wears you down, even though you can't have any mercy, in this line of work. When we got to Hunt's Wharf, off Lynn Street, she turned around and faced me. She said to me, "Where do you want me to stand? I'm going to make this easy for you. We all have our parts to play." I gave my testimony and it came with a price tag. "I'm ready to pay. Just tell me where you want me to drop and I'll walk right to the edge of the pier." She wasn't smiling. Her lips were straight as an arrow. No pouting, no whining, no tears, almost no emotion at all. No emotion. In my job you can't have any. But I'll tell you the truth. I was in no hurry to complete the work. I didn't even have my hand on my revolver. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to do it. But I've never seen a cooler cucumber than this woman. She said to me, "Will you do me one favor? I've written a will. Before you go back to wherever you came from, will you drop off the will for me? Just give it to the guy at the Victory Casa." How could I refuse? I said okay, I will do it. She opened her pocketbook to get the will. But what came out was a .45 automatic and I didn't even have my hand on my gun. She said, "Goodbye, And then she fired.
And so closes the career of a contractor for hire from the suburbs of Boston. As for the Mrs. Accomando, the lady with ice water in her veins, it is said that she not only voided the contract put out on her by the Big Sabu, but even took over his gang and became the North End's first female Don. She was called La Donna Accomando until she retired some years ago to West Palm Beach in Florida. And as for the widow, Mrs. Scalzillo, don't worry about her. She remarried out of the Italian community to a man named Smith and lived in luxury as heiress to a fortune and cough drops. That's it for Bill Russo's story, called Murder in the North End. This is your host Annabelle, asking you to come back again real soon. Won't you?